guys, Shira from Woodshop Diaries, and today I want to show you how to make these mid-century modern nightstands. If you remember a couple months ago, I made a mid-century modern dresser that I honestly did not expect to do as well as it did. So after that video, I had a ton of requests to make some matching nightstands, so here we are. So I will be building an entire matching bedroom furniture series in the coming weeks, so if you want to follow along and see all of those builds, be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. In the meantime, let's dive into these mid-century modern nightstands, and if you're ready to get building, let's go.
I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty excited that so many of you loved the mid-century dresser video, and I was more than happy to make a matching nightstand. Now, I built the original dresser for a friend of mine, but I'm building the matching nightstands, the bed, and a separate chest for my mom and dad's guest bedroom. I've got the printable plans, dimensions, and details linked below, but for now, let's get building.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the design of this project first. The entire project here was made out of plywood. I used maple. Normally I use birch, but my store was out of birch, so I just used maple for this project. And then I used some poplar scraps that I had for the legs. Now you can use any kind of wood that you have available for the legs, or even plywood if you wanted. The only thing about plywood is that when you cut this out with a jigsaw, the plies tend to shred a little, so it's probably not going to be as clean as if you just had some solid wood to use for these. The thing that you'll notice here is that I just simply butt joined all the corners. You could miter these if you preferred. I'm not going to be seeing the sides of this project once it gets in its place because it'll be between the bed and the wall. I just applied some edge banding to cover up all of my plywood edges. And also you'll notice probably how simple this design is. It's basically just a 15-inch box inside of a 16-inch box. I just wanted this little lip on the outside because I think it added a little bit of extra dimension and it looked kind of cool. And finally, I did add a drawer in the bottom here just to give some extra storage space for things that you might want to hide. But if you didn't really need any hidden storage and you didn't want to add the drawer, you could leave the drawer out and it still looks really nice even without the drawer.
Like I mentioned earlier, this project was made from 3/4 inch maple plywood, so I set my sheet up on my workbench, grabbed my circular saw and rip cut, and began cutting down my pieces. From this sheet, I ripped a piece to be used for the inside box and a piece to be used for the outside box. You can build a full nightstand from a single sheet of plywood, but since I was building 2 nightstands, I did cut my sheet down a little differently. I've got the plywood cut diagram shown in the plans linked below if you want to check those out.
So what I've got here is a 15-inch wide strip of plywood and a 16-inch wide strip of plywood. So basically the inside of the nightstand is going to be 15 inches wide and then the outside box is going to be 16 inches wide. So the outside box will actually go on last. So I'm going to take the 15-inch wide piece and cut it down into its proper lengths to get building.
I took my strip to the miter saw to cut to length. Now, my miter saw can cut up to 16-inch wide pieces, but if you have a smaller miter saw, you can continue using the circular saw to make the rest of the cuts. I have a video on how I cut down my plywood sheets with a circular saw that I will link below if you're interested in learning more about that. I cut my smaller strip of plywood into 5 pieces, 2 for the sides, 2 for the top and bottom, and 1 for the middle shelf. I applied edge banding to the front edges of these pieces. I'll link a detailed guide on applying iron-on edge banding below if you want to know more about it. I didn't apply edge banding to the sides here because they'll be covered in the finished project. I only added it to the fronts.
So what I've got here now is 2 sides, a top and a bottom, and then this middle shelf piece for this box. Now, since this box is basically going to be encapsulated by another box, all of the joinery can be easily hidden by just putting them on the outside of the box. So you can do this 2 super easy ways by literally just pre-drilling and driving screws, just some simple butt joints with screws on the outside of the box, or you can use pocket holes. I'm gonna use a combination just because that's what I feel like doing today. It doesn't really matter, either way is gonna hold the box fine, and it's all gonna be hidden once we put the outside on anyway.
I don't have any reasoning besides I just felt like doing it this way, but I used a combination of pocket holes to attach the box together and just some wood screws to install the shelf into the box. You could use either method for the entire thing, but I just felt like mixing and matching. I used some scrap blocks cut to 5 inches wide to help me evenly space my middle shelf and made sure to pre-drill here before driving the screws to prevent the plywood from splitting. Now that this inside box is together, I needed to add the outside box to it. However, before I did that, I went ahead and cut the feet out for the nightstand because they will attach to the bottom panel before it's attached to this box. I used the exact same template for this nightstand as I did for the matching dresser. I've included the template in the plans linked below for reference. As I mentioned earlier, you can cut these feet from 1x scraps or 3/4 inch plywood, whichever you prefer. I just used some scrap poplar that I already had handy and drew out one leg first. I cut it out with a jigsaw and sanded it smooth, and then I traced it 3 more times onto my board and cut them out and sanded well. The key thing here is to make sure that they're all the same height and that the top edge of each leg is parallel to the bottom edges so that they'll just sit nice and flat. I set these aside for right now and started cutting out my outside box pieces. I pulled that 16-inch wide plywood strip back out and cut to fit 2 sides that would cover the left and the right sides of the inside box. Then I cut a top and bottom panel that would fit over the top of this box, plus the side pieces that I'm about to add to it. Now you'll notice that the plywood here has it's got what I call a character side and then a boring side. I kind of always like the character side when technically that's the bad side. You're not supposed to use it on like what you see on the outside, but I usually do just because I like it. So I kind of need to decide whether I want the outside of this to be the character side or the boring side. And honestly, I think if I did the character side, it may be a little bit too much character. Maybe I'll do the sides and the bottom, like the boring side, and then maybe just the top I'll put the character on. I applied edge banding to the front edges of the side pieces and both the front and side edges of the top and bottom since they will be exposed. Then I glued these onto the existing box. I just used some wood glue to glue and clamp these sides on first, and then I glued on the top piece. Before adding this bottom piece, I attached the legs to the panel. I wanted these legs to angle towards the middle about 45 degrees, so I used this bead square to help me lay out my locations and measure that they were each about 2¼ inches in from the corner. Then I used my drill to pre-drill a hole through the bottom panel into each leg. I applied wood glue, partially drove a 2-inch long wood screw through the pre-drilled hole to help me get the leg back in the correct location, and then I drove the screw. After the first screw was in, I adjusted my angle as needed and pre-drilled and drove a second screw. Then I repeated this for all 4 legs. Then I glued and clamped this bottom panel onto the rest of the nightstand. Once it was clamped in place, I used a few 1¼ inch wood screws on the bottom to help hold it. That's totally optional. Now at this point, if you don't want to add a drawer, you can simply finish as desired and you're done. But since I was adding a drawer, I rummaged around my scrap pile to find some pieces to use for this drawer box. I found several odd pieces for the drawer boxes in my scrap pile, but I wanted to cut the fronts from the leftover maple plywood sheet so that it would match. I cut my drawer box and drawer front pieces down to size and then set up my table saw to cut some dados along the inside edges of my drawer box pieces. I cut 1/4 inch dados, 1/4 inch deep, a 1/2 inch from the bottom edge to install the 1/4 inch plywood drawer bottom. Now, if you don't have a way to cut dados, you can simply glue and staple or screw the 1/4 inch plywood bottom onto the bottom side of the drawer box once it's assembled. I cut a 1/4 inch plywood bottom panel to fit and assembled the drawer box using pocket holes and screws. If you're interested in learning more about how I measure, build, and install drawers, I have a detailed guide that I will link below. Once the drawer box was assembled, I installed the drawer front. Now, normally I don't install the drawer front until the drawer is on the slides. However, I had ordered the slides and they hadn't come in the mail yet, so I just went ahead and attached these so that I could be one step ahead. I set the drawer box up on some 3/4 inch plywood scraps to allow the front to hang off the bottom edge 3/4 inch. Then I made sure it was centered on the box left to right and screwed it in place with screws through the inside of the front of the drawer box. While I waited for the slides to come in the mail, I gave the drawer front and the nightstand 3 coats of Minwax Helmsman clear coat. By the time that was dry, the slides had arrived, so I installed these 14-inch ball bearing drawer slides into the nightstand into the bottom opening. I kept these flush to the front edge of the inside box. The drawer front will overlay the inside box, but be inset to the outside box. Once the slides were attached, I used some scrap 1/4 inch plywood to set the drawer box on in the opening and screwed the slides to the box. After adding a handle to the drawer, it was complete. This was such a fun build that's fairly simple, but packed with style. I'm so excited to build and share the rest of the matching pieces, and I really hope you're excited to see them all. If you'd like to build one of these simple nightstands for yourself, don't forget to grab the plans below. I hope you enjoyed this video and this project. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!